Well, here we are on a Tuesday, the 7th of April, 2020. Joe Rao Joe Cioffi, the Joe and Joe Weather Show.
There must be something going around because Robert Brown on our chat board,
Yes,
he just posted, I feel a nap coming on. Robert, if I'm in the same ballpark with you.
yeah, it's that kind of a day. But it turned really from start to finish. It turned out really nice today here. I had pretty much a little bit of cloud cover. This time of year, the mornings can tend to be cold, so sometimes you get low clouds that form because of the impacts with the ocean. So we started out with a little bit of cloud cover, and then by 8 o'clock it went partly to mostly sunny, and that's where we've been. And I'm looking out the window, and I'm still clear here, so that's a good thing. How about how goes by you?
I don't know. I've hardly woken up since this morning.
I thought
It,
I saw something that you had to jump in the car and go someplace to get
oh yeah, that's
stuff.
right. Yeah. Well, suddenly around 12 or 1 o'clock this afternoon, my wife came running downstairs, came into my office and said, "We got to jump in the car right now." And there's a Shell station in Yorktown at the intersection of Route 6 and 132, and they had some sort of a group that was giving out uh, free bottles of sanitizer and also masks from 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock today. So we jumped in the car and we traveled, and there was already like a long line of cars trying to get into the gas station. I said, "What if I wanted to get gas?" There was no gas. They weren't dispensing gas. You couldn't get gas. There were so many people at that gas station, and what they were doing is they were just giving out
That's
uh,
nice. That's nice.
bottles of sanitizer, and we each got two masks. So I said, and you treat these things now like they were free appliances.
I will tell you though, um, if I ever decide to tell my tick story again, which I'm not going to do now, but there's a gas station on off Route 84 in Putnam County that
Right.
I'm sure the person that was working there is no longer working there, um, but somebody could sort of explain to her exactly what a drugstore is, and we'll just kind of leave it at that.
Oh,
I had to I had to find a drugstore very quickly in order to get uh, to buy a pair of tweezers very quickly in order to
right,
remove a tick off my personage.
right.
And
Okay,
let's just say that the tick was in how shall we describe it, as a rather touchy area.
okay.
Okay. So when I walked into this gas station, I said, "Could you tell me where the nearest drugstore is?" I swear to God, she looked at me like I had 10 heads. Like, what? Huh? I said a drugstore. I'm not talking about where you buy your drugs. I'm talking about a drugstore, like a Rite Aid or a CVS or a Walgreens. No clue. No clue.
Yep.
By the way, how much did you pay for gas? I assume you filled up your gas tank while you were there.
No, you couldn't.
Couldn't get the gas? Well,
They,
what
it was
was
a
I'm just
delay.
kind of curious. What was gas going for?
Oh, it's still expensive up here. I mean,
Really?
the cheapest gas. Believe it or not, we actually have up where I live a Sinclair. Do you remember Sinclair?
Sure, sure. Dino.
Yeah, well, we have a Sinclair, and they were the cheapest price there as of a few days ago was 233.
Really?
And
The
many gas stations up here are somewhere between 245 and 265.
the Costco near me has a gas. There's a gas station. They have a gas station. $1.65 for regular,
Right,
a $1.98 for premium. The local stations are all in a range here of about from $1.99 to $2.15. The
right.
thing is, they haven't lowered prices. Those were the prices. The $1.99 not so much, but everybody was pretty much in a range of about 2.15 to 2.25 a month ago before all this happened. Nobody's been driving a car for a month, but the gas stations haven't really lowered their prices because they got to push that inventory out. But they're not selling it to anybody because the roads are empty. I usually top off my tank every 3 days or so with it's just a force of habit. Um, I went to the gas station yesterday for the first time in 3 weeks.
Hmm.
And, and there's that meme is running around is how many weeks to the gallon are you getting to your car
Right.
because no one's putting gas in. So anyhow,
And the let's see, I think it was in October. I had my oil changed in my SUV, and it said the next time I'm to bring it back would be 3,000 miles later, or when the odometer read 51,000 sometime in late January.
right.
Right. Joe, here we are in the middle of April, heading for the middle part of April. And today, as I drove back up my driveway and back into my garage after getting the Purell and the masks, 49,999 miles. I was supposed to hit 51,000 miles with regular driving back in January.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't even hit 50,000 yet, and here it is now in part of April.
I know. I'm trying to get to 300,000. I'm a 299.4.
Yeah,
So Robert Brown says his gasoline where he is, and I get Robert. I'm thinking are you in Maryland or North Carolina right now? At 149. Chuck Cardillo up in the Catskills at 245. Keith James at 179 in New Jersey. That's a little odd because up until recently, gasoline in New York has been cheaper than gasoline in New Jersey because your state's been raising taxes left and right on gasoline. So now you guys happen to be cheaper than we are, which is odd.
thank you,
Timothy
Murphy.
Timothy Veltman is at 223 in upstate New York. Um, let's see. I'm just running to see if anybody else. No, that's pretty much the gamut. I know in California it's still hovering in the low $3, but they have taxes up the rear end over there.
But you're right, Joe. They have to get rid of all of their inventory. This is the gas that's probably still in their tanks from before this whole thing started.
Right.
They're not going to budge on dropping the prices very much so long as all of those tanks are still filled with
Well,
that.
they're going to have to eventually because they're going to have to move their inventory, and
Right.
and if they don't, and by the way, just this is not a good thing that we're seeing, gas prices plummeting, and because that's a sign that there's absolutely no demand.
Right.
So and that's something for those people they've been talking when they got to eventually start the economy up again. The fact that gasoline is cheap is because no one's using it and the economy is shut down.
Correct.
So a sign that things will be getting better actually is if gasoline prices eventually start heading back up. But that might not be. That may take a while because of the oil is there's so much oil they're gonna have to pay people to take it and burn it because there's no place to store it.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
you and I both remember, we're old enough to remember the fact that when we were young, okay, and this is why you got to be careful about when you get these apocalyptic predictions that are made by people that have political agendas, because there's a almost 99% probability that they will turn out to be wrong in a big way. I leave a 1% chance that they might be right, in which case, if they are, usually then it doesn't matter because the world is going to come to an end anyway. They wouldn't even be able to say, I told you so. But
Absolutely.
you and I both remember growing up in the 70s how we were told that we were going to run out of oil before the 90s were over with, that, all sorts of apocalyptic nonsense that never came to be.
The so-called energy crisis.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So anyway, just bear that in mind. Yes, Robert, you and I, we all sat in gas lines in the 70s, waiting for gasoline so I could pay. At the time, I remember it was like it went over $1 a gallon, and it just like it flipped everybody out because $1 was a lot in those days, and when your car only got 7 miles to the gallon, that made it even worse.
Correct.
Okay.
33 cents a gallon, if I recall correctly, in July of 1972.
Mm-hmm.
And we went on a trip to Canada that month, and my grandfather almost blew a gasket because in Canada he was upset by the fact that it was 50 cents a gallon for gas, GAZ,
GAZ.
and
Nice.
50 cents a gallon. he probably would have died seeing what the prices are today, or even what the prices were to become.
Well, yeah,
You know,
adjusted for inflation.
yeah,
Actually, adjusted for if you adjust for inflation, gasoline right now is probably as cheap as it was in the early '70s before the first Arab oil embargo in 1973, 74, I believe.
and
So,
you remember in 2000 and I think it was 2008, gas selling for 140 a gallon. Excuse me, 140
oil was 140 a
oil,
barrel.
oil
Yeah.
140 a barrel.
And
Yeah,
on the spot market the other day, I saw it trading at the spot market for $4 a barrel. A glass of beer costs more than a barrel of oil.
amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, we've got some weather going on. I just want to point out that for those of some of our watchers who are watching from the great state of Maine, your winter continues because we have actually winter storm watches up for a number of counties in Maine. Seems like it's mostly the middle counties, the northernmost counties are not in it right now, and the southernmost counties are not in it right now. But everybody in the middle in it, and we do have some flash flood watches up and winter storm warnings continuing for Southern California because they've been getting nailed with that upper low that's been offshore for the last couple of days. But tonight's story, Joe, I think is going to be severe weather. We had a warm up today. I'm looking at temperatures in Ohio and West Virginia and in Kentucky, where we saw temperatures climb up into the middle and upper 70s. We did fairly well today with most readings in the 60s. There's some sea breeze action going on in parts of New Jersey and here at home on Long Island for me. 60s down in Virginia, 60s in Pennsylvania. The Storm Prediction Center has actually added an area of enhanced risk tonight in Ohio, much of northern Ohio, including Cleveland. Back into southern Michigan, including Detroit and northwestern Indiana, we have slight risk that goes all the way down into southern Pennsylvania, Delaware, the Delmarva Peninsula, Virginia, and into northeastern North Carolina. Um, you and I are both out of it, although we're both in that general thunderstorm area, and the enhanced risk area coincides with a 2 to 5% probability of tornadoes, and you can see on the slight risk carries that 15% risk of strong winds of 50 knots or higher.
Well, the bottom part of the lower peninsula of Michigan, from what I was able to see earlier on the convective outlook, seems to be the epicenter or the bullseye for not only just tornadic activity, but also they had a hatched area for the potential for large hail upwards to 2 inches in diameter in that particular region.
Yep,
Now,
there's the hail map.
yeah, and you see the thing is, yeah, we might see hear a rumble of thunder in parts of the tri-state area after midnight tonight, but I think the more concerning day will be Thursday, whether or not we get into a wedge of warm, juicy air after a warm front passes by and just prior to the passage of a cold front midday on Thursday. If we can manage to get it into that wedge of potential convective activity, and that's the big question mark.
Totally agree with you. Totally agree with you on that.
Can the warm front move on through here? And if so, now I saw they were even talking about they being the Storm Prediction Center for Thursday now,
Yes.
talking about the possibility going all the way up into southern New England. And I'm saying, boy, that's going to be a push. Do they actually believe the warm front can make it all the way past southern New England on Thursday? Now, I'm not a severe storms expert. I'm just saying from, empiricism that we've seen a lot of warm fronts that have had trouble getting through the tri-state area, Long Island. But that I think will be the more interesting and more if you're into storms.
Well, what might help it on Thursday is the fact that we don't really have a strong onshore flow setting up ahead of it. So that might help it a bit. It's not like we have a big high up in New England that's sort of wedged down. I'll bring up SPC's risk area in a moment. This is for tomorrow, where they have a large area of slight risk in Missouri, southern Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Alabama, Mississippi, and Arkansas, and also slight risk in parts of South Texas, and a fairly large area of marginal risk. And then as we move on into Thursday, as Joe indicated, SPC not quite yet with the severe weather up into New England. They do have general thunderstorms up into southern Vermont, New Hampshire, and southernmost Maine. Marginal risk from southern New Jersey, Maryland, and Delaware southward into Virginia, and then moving back westward into western North and South Carolina and northern Georgia. I tend to think that this has a shot maybe of getting expanded a little bit when we get into Thursday, but at least for the time being, uh, they've got the marginal risk fairly far to the, not into southern New Jersey, but they don't have the marginal risk up further north than that.
They'll have to mull it over for one more day, I think, before they move anything. But yeah, it'll that'll be the scenario for early Thursday, and that cold front looks like it certainly is potent enough to touch off some nasty weather. It's just whether or not we get the juicy air in here for to interact with that warm front, that cold front on Thursday. That's the big question.
So I'm looking at the satellite, Joe, and watching the clouds from the Great Lakes, high clouds, and there's a pretty strong shortwave trough that's moving across the Great Lakes right now, and we're seeing also some scattered heavy thunderstorms with that. There were also some big thunderstorms that moved over the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula in the last couple of hours. Those have moved offshore, and there's also some southern moisture that's trailing across the Gulf states, and that's likely to start setting up the round of severe weather that we're going to see for tomorrow into tomorrow night. The radar, some showers now moving into eastern Pennsylvania and moving across New York State. You might see some raindrops soon up your way, and then eventually for me. There's the strong thunderstorm that has now moved off the southern part of the Delmarva Peninsula. You've got some scattered cells around elsewhere. And this, what you're seeing up in Michigan with some very strong storms moving across Lake Michigan and into western Michigan on the lower peninsula there, that's with the shortwave trough. And I think that's the one that might generate some thunderstorms tonight as that shortwave trough moves and low pressure moves from Michigan down into western Pennsylvania, western New York, and eventually off the coast of New Jersey and Long Island tomorrow morning. Some rain right now in central Alabama and central Georgia on the radar. There's also still some rain in Southern California, and we saw the watches and warnings, winter storm warnings in some of the mountains in Southern California, north of Los Angeles and San Diego, and also the flash flood, the large area flash flood watches that we were up, and a little bit of streaky precip moving across North Dakota and into Minnesota, and that's just about it. So I'm going to bring up the GFS. I'm going to do the wide one so we can take a look at weather, elsewhere besides here. And a couple of things struck me is the fact that so for tonight we'll get that out of the way. So we're going to get this system here that drops down. You've got a low near Grand Rapids at 8 o'clock tonight, and you can see how it drops southeastward to off of Long Island by tomorrow morning. The big issue for tomorrow is going to be where this low is. So I'm going to just kind of draw what will probably be a bit of a frontal boundary here. You're going to have northeast winds coming in to southern New England to about New York City. You're going to have westerly winds from central and southern New Jersey southward. That's going to create a pretty wide range in temperatures. Southeastern New England near Cape Cod tomorrow, Joe, for example, probably won't get out of the 40s. New York City might get to 60 with a little bit of luck. But
Well, I'm glad you said that because I think tomorrow, I think I may have mentioned this yesterday, is that whether or not we are able to make it to um, get into some breaks of sunshine tomorrow afternoon, which will play a key role. But I think with northeasterly winds tomorrow and a lot of clouds, especially early in the day, and a little slight bit of precipitation too, I think the temperatures tomorrow are going to be hard pressed to make it even in New York City, maybe not anywhere higher than 54 or 55 tomorrow.
well, you know what might happen tomorrow, Joe? After tomorrow, late in the afternoon, maybe late in the afternoon. It's one of in the springtime. You could be cloudy for 3/4 of the day, and if the sun can break out like at 4 or 5 o'clock, you could suddenly have a quick temperature boost just from that because of how strong the sun is. I mean, that would
Right,
be over forecasting it on my part.
right.
I'm really kind of trying to be a rocket scientist here by doing that, but um, there's also a couple of showers that the GFS picks up on in early afternoon tomorrow. I mean, there probably is some kind of weak upper air system going by. South and west, if you go down, I'm thinking if you go South Jersey, Southern Pennsylvania southward, it'll probably make it to 70 or better tomorrow. Thursday, now here, but right on the heels of this is the fact that you have this next low running across southern Canada with a really strong cold front, and the models have actually been fairly impressive with trying to show an area of convection Thursday morning into early afternoon. And this front, by the way, extends all the way down into Florida, even though there's not going to be much action once you get south of, say, eastern Virginia with this. Uh, the front's going to probably come through relatively uneventfully in the south. But all back up, we've got cold air. This is a decent shot, a decent cold high that's coming down out of Canada. And that is going to start to spread in some chilly air just in time for Easter weekend. The low, by the way, this low for Thursday, and I think this is why we've got winter storm watches up in Maine. It's not for this first low, which goes out, but this low for Thursday really kind of goes bonkers when it redevelops in the Gulf of Maine. You got a 975 low there near Portland, Maine by Thursday night. And the entire state of Maine is in that dark blue snow on the GFS and on the NAM as well. The gradient, I think, is going to get fairly tight here, Joe. I think it could get fairly windy here on Friday, at least for a while.
Well, how about on Thursday?
Or even Thursday, absolutely. Thursday afternoon after the front goes by, sure.
I think we could be seeing winds gusting to over 40 on Thursday, and I agree with you. It could continue to be blowing here right on through Friday.
And Friday, by the way, looks like in a sense, it looks like a map in January. You got a 72 low in New Brunswick, and all the light blue snow going on in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, upstate New York. Probably a little bit of lake effect that's going to happen. And some of this is going to also be elevation driven in places to the east because of the time of year. Excuse me. Uh, the um, uh, the weekend, and I'm going to just bring up the upper air here. And by the way, I did pull up the teleconnections today, and I think they were having just a little bit of difficulty in up in the up in NOAA where they make the teleconnections. Let's see if they fixed it. Oh, they did fix it. Okay, so we have teleconnections here. They had blank maps before. Look at the PNA actually going positive by the time we get to April 14th. So for the second half of this forecast period, this is telling us ridge in the west, the NAO negative right now, and that goes to neutral and says neutral to negative through the period. And we have a very strongly negative EPO. So this is a chilly signature that we're seeing here. And it's going to be interesting to see, Joe, with that positive PNA in the latter part of after April 15th. Maybe that opens the door for what you were saying the last couple of days when you've been bringing up, the possibility of maybe something mid-month from the standpoint where we'll be in a colder pattern. Maybe not here, but up in New England perhaps, or upstate New York, or up in the Great Lakes. Your teleconnections are kind of going in that particular direction. But if you look at the upper air 500 here, this is a very, very cold mid-April pattern that's developing. It goes blocky. The blockiness comes back and forth, but the trough stays mainly in the east, and you got a lot of energy swinging around from Canada southward. You also have some energy coming in from the Pacific that's in the mix. So I guess it's going to be a matter of whether you get the northern and southern stream shortwaves to kind of line up in the right spot. But you finally have that January upper air that everybody was looking for. You're going to, in February, looking forward in February, you finally have the pattern now when you've got, very little to work with because of the time of year we're in. But that's just the way it happens sometimes.
And what do you think about the possibility on Friday, later Friday or Friday night, for maybe some lake effect for Western New York and maybe
Yeah,
down?
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. I've got no issue with that. definitely there's going to be some because you got the upper trough the way it's swinging. That's cold air. That's relatively cold air that's coming down behind that low. Now, the Easter weekend is going to be here, so Saturday looks like it's an okay day, and Easter Sunday I think we'll have increasing clouds. The high goes off the South Atlantic coast, so we're going to have mostly southeast winds ahead of a low coming out of the southern plains. The GFS suddenly wants to deepen a low up into the Great Lakes with this, big occlusion, this big arm that swings northward. So it looks like it brings in here rain Sunday night into Monday morning, and then after that, it just kind of improves as we go into the first part of next week. And by the way, here's where the model has on the 18Z run, and I think it had it on the 12Z run, Joe, on the 228 hour. There's your 976 low southeast of Atlantic City with dark blue snows all over the place. And it stays in the 970s as it goes through the Gulf of Maine. So you know what? There's your chance. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And there's probably a very high probability that even though the models are showing it, it ain't going to happen.
Well, I'll tell you, I looked at the 12Z, and the 12Z didn't have anything remotely looking like that. So you just know that when we go to the 0Z run later tonight.
Yeah, the overnight runs had it, I think, and then the 12Z maybe took it away, and then now it brought it back. By the way, we shouldn't. We should also point out that in this pattern, there's probably going to be chances for snow in the Rockies as well, and we're seeing on Saturday low pressure down in southern Colorado and snows in through Montana and Wyoming. That energy is going to be eventually coming out into the plains. So Easter Sunday could bring some snows for Nebraska, Minnesota, northwestern Iowa, southeastern parts of South Dakota, and on up into northern Wisconsin, especially if we wind up with a wrapped up low like this that the GFS has way to the west. The European's a little bit different. The European has more of the energy pushing to the east. I think probably because it has a bit more of a blocky look to it. So the low is a 92 low in North Texas, which winds up going into western Pennsylvania. I don't know. That seems to make a little more sense to me. Either way, it winds up that we'll probably get into some rain heavy at times here Easter Sunday night into Monday of next
Right,
week.
right. There was a time I think the European was a few days ago was suggesting that that rain would start moving in here by later on Easter Sunday, but it looks like right now that the daylight hours of Easter Sunday will be dry, and as you just pointed out, a rather heavy dose of rainfall possible here, and maybe some gusty winds as well for Sunday night into maybe the first part of Monday. So
All
uh,
right.
at least we'll keep the daylight part of the holiday dry, and then we'll get all wet here probably Sunday night and again part of Easter Monday.
Yes. So let's do a little Briller Jeopardy, if we will. And this is a non weathered Briller Jeopardy question. Are you ready?
A non-weather.
Non weather.
Okay.
There are four state capitals that begin with the same first letter of the state. Okay. In other words, the city and state both start with the same letter.
The city and the state for us. All right.
Okay. There are four states that is the case. Okay. Name those four states.
Well, I know a lot of things. Carson City is the capital of Nevada.
Right.
No,
Yeah.
but that's not
Right.
we're looking for.
You should have
Oh.
taken that left turn at Albuquerque.
uh, Gee, Joe, I'm going through all 50 states in my mind right
You
now.
know what it is? It's 50 states. So
Portland, Maine, Albany, New York. That doesn't
all
work.
right. So I'll give you a hint. One is relatively close to us. Okay. One is almost as far away as you can be. Um, and the other two are somewhere in the middle.
Mm. Well,
Okay. So
gotta
I'll give you another hint. Okay. In this one particular state, the welcome to and you are now leaving signs are basically 2 miles apart.
oh,
And there's a toll booth in between.
really?
Yes.
Ah, ah. I don't know, and you know when you tell me the answer, it's going to jump out at
Yeah,
me.
you'll know. If when I tell you all the answers, you'll know. Um,
Oh,
Delaware,
Dover, Delaware.
Dover, Delaware.
Right.
Okay, so that's the one that's closest. Now, the one that's furthest away was the subject of a prize that they almost won on the Freddie Fillmore show. Females are fabulous.
Honolulu, Hawaii.
Honolulu, Hawaii, land of Goshen. You got it.
Right.
Yes. Oh God, just around the corner, there's a rainbow in the sky.
And the other
So
now, land,
let's have another cup of coffee.
land.
Let's have another piece of pie, you idiot. Okay, so that's two. Now the ones that are in the middle, these Indiana,
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma.
Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, correct, and,
Okay.
and Indianapolis, Indiana.
Right.
So those are the four.
And there you go.
And there you go. All right, so I'm going to go to the chat board and
I have a
say hi to everybody.
my wife handed me this a few moments ago from Christianopedia. Is
Yes,
that how you pronounce it?
Christianopedia, that is
Right.
correct.
Wants to know about the pink moon.
Oh, yeah, please do, because tonight, we have a full moon tonight, right?
It's the full super moon.
Super moon.
And already, I've already seen the National Weather Service has already put up like coastal flood advisories, not necessarily for any kind of major storm, but simply because now that the moon is at its closest point to the Earth, and now that it's in the full phase, we have spring tides, which are higher than normal. There's a much greater range of tides. But the reason why we call it the pink moon in April is that there's a pink flower called the phlox, PHLOX. The pink spring phlox is out in bloom, and that's why they call it. I'll tell you what, a much better name for the April full moon, if you want to look for a plant, forsythia. The forsythia is
Yes.
blooming everywhere, and
They're almost done blooming now. They bloom very early. They're one of the first to bloom.
yeah. Well, up here where I am, I get a sense that we're a little bit chillier than down where you are. And this was the first time I've been out of the house, anywhere away from the house in quite some time. So when we drove down to get the masks and the Purell, I said, "Boy, look at this! Look at all the forsythia. It's beautiful out in blue." And I said, "See what you're missing, Joe, by not taking the car and not
Yeah.
moving around or whatever."
This.
Um, I also the pink full moon. It brings back, Joe, a memory from like way back when I was maybe 4 or 5 years old on CBS Channel 2 back, let's say in the early 60s. The person who did their weather was a woman by the name of Carol.
Carol Reed.
And Carol Reed one night
Not to
said,
be confused with the director Carol Reed, but go on.
and Carol Reed said one night, and tonight's the night of the pink full moon. So my mom said, "Oh, let's go out and take a look at the pink full moon." I got very excited. We went outside. There was the full moon, but it looked like its normal self. And like we both looked at each other, and she said, "Why did she call it the pink moon? It doesn't look pink to me." But again, it had nothing to do with
Right.
the moon looked. It was just simply it's named after that pink flower, the phlox.
Justin Partridge pointing out the way things are. He's got his radio to keep him company because there isn't much going on, and you're right. A lot of the cities are like ghost towns. To see pictures coming out from New York City, from even some of the local towns out here, I've seen people put up pictures of streets that are usually, for the smaller towns, the regular local traffic during the day. To see them absolutely empty and not a car anywhere is very much like I think you pointed out with what you went through today going to the gas station. It's just sort of like being in an episode of the Twilight Zone.
Right. We are stuck in an episode of I mean, like Joe, coming back from the gas station, and we're driving up um, Mill Street. And at the end of Mill Street, there is the Putnam Valley Museum. Yes, we do have a little rustic museum in my hometown. Well, guess what? There's those illuminated signs that tell you about speed conditions and whatever like that. It basically said, "Stay home, don't go anywhere. COVID-19." And and another sign in front of the museum saying, "Stay safe, Putnam Valley." It really it's crazy. It's something that you don't
Well, look, if we're going to be
kind of a Twilight Zone
if we're
episode.
going to be a Twilight Zone episode, just so long as it's not the Twilight Zone episode of to serve entitled to serve man, because I don't
Yeah,
want to be an ingredient as a recipe in a cookbook.
right.
Oh, by the way, speaking of which, I put up, folks, on my YouTube channel, on my channel page, okay, just so you know, I created a playlist for just my cooking videos that I've been doing. So if you go to my YouTube channel, if you want to find them, they're all in one place, and they should be right on that channel homepage of mine, where you can uh, just go right to the videos and you don't have to search. Okay, so anyway, Chuck Cardillo, I'm trying to bring up the sea surface temperatures. Um, hold on, for the Pacific, because he's asking. He noticed that the waters were warming up, uh, and whether there's going to be a developing El Nino. I think the last I looked, um, it was a developing La Nina that they were all worried about.
Right.
So let me see if I can find. I'm trying to find a sea surface temperature map here. Of course, there's one site I usually go to. Is this the one? Come on. Yeah, here it is. Okay, good. So let me bring up. I'll bring up the full Pacific. Okay, so this kind of shows it to some degree. So let me just bring it up for Chuck here. Hang on a second. Oh boy.
So what else is due?
Here we go. So these are the sea surface temperature anomalies on April 6th. So as of yesterday, and you'll notice, so the equator is here's the zero line. So here's the zero line right here. Okay, so there's the equator, and this is 20 degrees north right there. And the ocean water temperatures in that stretch are actually running close to or just slightly above normal. But you'll notice that there's some pockets of below normal temperatures starting to show up in this region in the Pacific, where I've drawn the red circles. You also have below average temperatures developing out in the Central Pacific as well, up around 20 degrees north. This looks to me like it has more of a signature of a La Nina down the road. It's not quite there yet, but maybe in another month or two, we're going to see an expanding area of below average temperatures in this part of the equatorial Pacific. And as we, have pointed out, if it's a La Nina that we're going to have there versus an El Nino, the La Nina is a trigger mechanism for a very active hurricane season on the Atlantic side. Doesn't necessarily mean that active season gets underway immediately. Um, it could wait till early to mid August, like it did a few years back when we had the La Nina, and then all of a sudden we went from having one or two names. We basically had like 6 or 7 named storms that happened virtually in a row over a matter of about a week to 10 days. So just bear that in mind. These are broad indices when broad indicators when we look at them. Uh, they don't necessarily. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have an early start to the hurricane season, or that we'll see anything in May, June, or July. But the La Nina, the La Nina, Joe, seems to be where they're all going forecast wise.
Right. And who knows how that's going to play into next winter if we have a La Nina spilling over from late summer into the fall and winter season. And we had a winter this year where there was no El Nino, there was no La Nina, but it was certainly as unusual as any winter we've had in recent years, with the bottling up, so to speak, of the polar vortex sitting over the polar regions and not allowing any of that cold air really to escape, at least not too many times this winter.
Correct. So anyway, let's wrap it up. It looks like things are getting back to normal because the crowd was a little bigger tonight. And by the way, for those of you who want to continue with the chat board is always very active on this show, and it continues on the Discord link, which I put up on the chat board now. So if you haven't signed up to Discord yet, you can and join all the regulars that are on the chat board every day, sharing weather information, conversation, and much more. And every once in a while, I do pop in there. So um, just everybody be on their best behavior. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm happy because my cigars finally arrived. I was very upset. I've been without, but they came today, so I'm happy. And I have a little bit of wine left, so that's where I'm going now. I'm gonna have my glass of wine, gonna have a little smoke, and then go to sleep.
I saw something. Uh, Usually we leave bottles and cans right near the front door, so we have a separate barrel outside. They collect on Friday what we call carbingle, paper and plastic and glass and whatever. And I saw a bottle that was near the front door. I looked at it, and it was a bottle of Harvey's Bristol Cream.
Oh
And
boy,
now I don't drink, so Mrs. Rayo
you
has
should drink.
who
You should
me?
start drinking. Yeah,
But
it's
when I
time
saw
to it's time to correct a bad habit.
well, a little late in the ball game for that, I think, for me. But uh, there, I looked at this bottle and I felt kind of sad in a way because that bottle of Harvey's Bristol Cream was given to me by a mutual friend of ours, Bob Wolf, who passed
Oh
away,
yeah,
about 3 years ago. And I remember when he turned 90,
God
90
bless him.
years, and he was still active. In fact, he was active until his last day. He died at the age of 96. And myself and the sports director at News 12 Westchester, Walt Fowler, we found online somewhere a disc of the entire World Series game that Bob called in 1956 when Don Larson threw still the only perfect game in World Series history.
Wow.
And when you see Bob Wolf or when you hear of Bob Wolf, that's what they always show. They show the final out. Here he is getting ready to throw. A perfect game for Don Larson. But you never see the entire game or never hear anything about it. We found a disc of the entire game and we gave it to Bob on his 90th birthday. And Bob followed up the following, his birthday was in November. Next following month, Christmas, he came up to me and he said, "Here, this is for you." And I looked at it and it was a bottle of Harvey's Bristol Cream.
That's
And,
really cool.
and now the Harvey's Bristol Cream has finally been depleted
Depleted.
after about 6 years or whatever. And but I felt sad. I said it's almost like Bob. I said you look at something, an inanimate object, and it's funny how
Yeah, it triggers a memory. Sure, that happens. That happens to me all the time,
yeah,
and it happens to all of us. Yeah, it's funny because sometimes it could be the oddest thing.
right.
Sometimes it doesn't have to be even directly related. Like yours, that was directly related to the person, but it could be something, minuscule, and suddenly it'll just trigger a series of memories in your head, and you'll think of that person, a certain person. Yeah, it's
He
weird.
was
The human mind is a weird thing and an amazing thing.
Bob was the nicest person. Now you and I have been in the broadcasting business for many many years, and I think you'll agree here. He was one of the nicest individuals in this cutthroat dog eat dog world of broadcasting that I have ever known. And when I was just a rookie in television and I was just starting out stringing at News 12 Long Island,
Hmm.
and I was this is like the second or third time that I'd ever done this, and no one was telling me anything over there. Nobody was saying to me, you should do this or you should do that or you look good or you're not so good or whatever. And I didn't know from one moment to the next if I was going to be called back to do a fill-in over there. And Bob, who was even then fairly well advanced in years, he must have been in his mid or late 60s, and where Bob's office was, you remember this, Joe, was on the other side of the building, and we were in the graphic office. We were sharing the office with the graphics people, the weather
Right.
office,
Hmm.
and Bob walked all the way from his office into the graphics room to introduce himself to me. And I said, we haven't been formally met. I'm Bob Wolf. Of course, I knew who Bob Wolf was. I used to watch Bob
Right.
when he did Ranger games and Nick games, and of course, he was a living legend in sports anyway. And he said to me, he says, "I've been watching you. You're just starting in this TV business." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "You're gonna do good. I like the way I like your patter." And it was, and I said to myself after, I said, "My God, Bob Wolf said that he liked what I was doing." And I always remembered that. And years later, we were at Bob. This shows how great Bob was. Bob was nominated for an Emmy. He was something like 92 years old, but he was doing sports commentary, and he was there, and I was there at the Emmy Awards that year. And I came up to him. I said, "Bob, you remember when I first met you, and when you first introduced me?" He said, "You're going to go places. You're going to be good. You're going to be all right in this business." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, look around you." He says,
Yeah.
"Was I wrong?"
Exactly. Exactly.
Great guy, Bob Wolf.
Uh,
Triggered by a bottle of Harvey's.
Barbie's Bristol Cream. All right, let's call it a night. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll see you tomorrow, 7 o'clock at the usual time. Nighty night.